For someone that's been programmed for so long to be practical, to be logical, how do we bust past that reasonable trap?
How much do you want that thing?
Oof.
Maybe a lot of it, Craig, comes down to just desire. If we go to our sweet spot and let our signature strengths really try to exploit those, you can work really, really hard, but it's fun. You know, quantum leaps so often are easier than more incremental goals. It's often easier to make something 10 times bigger than it is to make it 10% bigger.
How can one begin to flex the muscle or to be even begin to think so differently, so radically, so crazy, so outside the box?
It's interesting just to make a distinction between those people that they're playing to win, and then you've got other people, they're playing not to lose. And it's a real difference in how it shapes behavior. So all these years, that's where I've played, and I've watched how organizations struggle and succeed or fail in trying to make a corporate quantum leap. And I've watched those same executives, and I've watched so many entrepreneurs wanting to make a quantum leap, watching them at an individual level and seeing the same kinds of dynamics that what worked and what didn't. You learn from your clients, you know that, that your clients are your teachers in a way.
Absolutely. You know, this idea of a quantum leap, I'm fascinated by it and by the way that you described it. And a couple of the books that I read of yours, U Squared and the Quantum Leap Theory, completely changed what I perceived to even be possible. So if we just wheel that in for some of the listeners that maybe are just experiencing you for the first time, what is a quantum leap? On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very exclusive treat. He's one of the foremost experts on fast growth strategies and breakthrough innovation with a PhD in psychology. He's recognized worldwide for his thought leadership on merger integration, just to name a few. He's the author of the all-time bestseller on mergers, The Employee Guide to Mergers and Acquisitions, and he's one of the best-selling business authors in the world, with over 15 million books sold across 30 titles. Big facts. His distinctive minimum effective dose approach has guided Fortune 1000 companies for over 40 years, and his work has been referenced in many of the major business journals and newspapers, from CNN and CNBC, just to name a couple. His science-based strategies for breakthrough performance have transformed executive teams across 50 countries, and his book, The Quantum Leap Strategy, has changed the way I personally view the richness of life and all that I perceive to be possible. He's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and a terrific human being. Please welcome the brilliant, articulate, pioneering, insightful, and handsome Dr. Price Pritchett. How you doing, Dr. Price?
Well, I'm doing better all of a sudden, Let's just go through that all again, really get me cranked here.
I got to tell you, I look forward to all the podcasts. They're very selective. And one of the cool things about doing what we get to do is, I get to choose who we have on the show. I'm not sure if I've ever been as excited for a guest as I am for you. I love your work. I've been studying you from afar. I've read a bunch of your books. And the way that you make these kind of complex concepts digestible is second to none. So I just wanted to personally acknowledge you and let you know how pumped I am, and I know our audience will be as well for today's conversation.
You are so kind, and I really appreciate that coming from someone who has commanded the kind of audience you have, Craig, and your own story. I always think it's interesting to read the stories of the background of the people that are doing the heavy duty things these days in the world of personal growth, self-directed change and those kinds of things. It's fascinating to me.
I appreciate that. I received that. Thank you. And we could take this conversation all over the map, but I want to start here. I think this is a good place to kind of begin. This idea of a quantum leap, I'm fascinated by it and by the way that you described it. And a couple of the books that I read of yours, U Squared and the Quantum Leap Theory, completely changed what I perceived to even be possible. So if we just wheel that in for some of the listeners that maybe are just experiencing you for the first time, what is a quantum leap?
Well,
Real quick, if you've been vibing with this conversation and you're committed to making this your season of transformation, grab my book, The Reinvention Formula. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and it reveals the exact strategies I used to go from stuck on Wall Street for 13 years misaligned to building a global movement, and how you can reinvent your identity, your business, and your life with intention. You can get it anywhere books are sold, Amazon included. And if you like to listen, Audible's got you covered. No hype, just real tools that actually work. Back to the episode.
I've spent my professional career working with corporate America and major corporations, and I could list them, but they're the blue chip companies, the heavy hitters, the real shakers and movers in the corporate world. And I started out in Chicago after I finished my my years in the military. I was in the Pentagon. I'd done a clinical internship for my PhD, but I wrote my dissertation on personal breakthroughs, fast growth, self-directed change, that whole thing. So I've been playing in this sandbox for a long, long time, Craig. But when I was in Chicago, one of the main things we did, this was early in my career post-military, we would do executive assessments of key executive candidates that were being considered for a really top deck executive job, maybe a plant manager, maybe a company vice president, maybe a division head, maybe a president candidate. And we would do in-depth evaluations on these people. And so that was a main part of our revenue. And from week to week, it would be interesting because I'd evaluate a person this week, someone this week, and you'd look at those two guys in terms of overall academic credentials, personality, their looks, whatever. And you'd think, well, these two guys ought to be able to make about the same amount of money, but one would be performing at twice the level of the other one. And I was just kind of struck by this because, well, first of all, I'd been curious about the high achievers all those years prior to that, and I just thought one of these guys is making better choices, and it's really making a profound difference in his career. Well, then in 1974, I came to Dallas and started Pritchett LP, my company. And after about 5 years of doing pretty much the same things I'd been doing in Chicago, I got bored, Craig. And actually, looking back on it, that was one of my real quantum leaps at that time. But I took us into merger integration strategy work, which was not a consulting field. There was no firm out there that specialized in merger integration strategy. And there were zillions of mergers being done, but nobody had really buttoned down how to do the integration process in a systematic, effective fashion. Okay, so that took us into that zone. And I began to see the same kind of pattern happening. Let's say you've got company A and it's doing 500 million a year in revenue, and it's growing at about 5 to 7% a year, just organic growth. Okay, good. Company B, same size, pretty much $500 million in revenue, about the same kind of organic growth, both respectable growth companies. But one day, company A goes out and acquires company C, same size company, pretty much. And all of a sudden, like that, it's doubled in size. That's fast growth because they made different choices. They took on different risks. And they did those things that enable a person or an organization to really make a breakthrough in terms of results. And so all of these years, that's where I've played. And I've watched how organizations struggle and succeed or fail in trying to make a corporate quantum leap. And I've watched those same executives, and I've watched so many entrepreneurs wanting to make a quantum leap. And so watching them at an individual level and seeing the same kinds of dynamics that what worked and what didn't, whether you talk about a corporate level or an individual level. So that's where so much of my thought processes and my concepts have come from is just seeing again 50 years now. I've been, you know, watching these things and learning. You learn from your clients, that,
Sure.
that's that your clients are your teachers in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So well said. And even just how you describe that. So two people in a similar situation, one did something that was outside the box. It was a calculated risk. And just like that, instead of maybe some incremental growth, they doubled in size, just like that. So my follow-up question is, how can one begin to flex the muscle or to be even begin to think so differently, so radically, so crazy, so outside the box? Is that a muscle that can be flexed? Can that be taught?
I think it can be. Um, I think that some people are naturally bent in that direction in terms of being willing to take on that kind of challenge. And some people, it's extremely difficult for them. People are made so different, differently. And I've seen this over the years. I've had people in my own organization. It's interesting just to make a distinction between those people that they're playing to win. And then you've got other people, they're playing not to lose.
Hmm. Big
And it's a
difference.
real difference in how it shapes behavior. Um, and so I think people can be taught the principles, the key concepts, and that's what I try to do. And I think that we can also be extremely helpful to an individual or an organization, large or small, once they get into trying to make this big performance increase. I mean, not just a incremental increase of nice, maybe 10% growth, 12% growth this year. No, no, no. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something much bigger than that. I think sometimes when the individual or the organization gets into that zone of attempting that, then they get scared off by by what they see happening around them. They don't understand the process. And they're, first of all, too many individuals or organizations, they come in and they've got a big goal or a big dream, big wish. And so they kick into gear to chase it down, but they don't really have a methodology. They're kind of feeling their way along more than you would wish. They don't have a process, they don't have a system. And so they can they misconstrue the signs of progress.
Hmm.
Because if you start toward a big goal, you screw up, you make mistakes,
Sure.
you take a wrong course, you experience failures. And they don't see that as a sign of progress because it is counterintuitive.
Sure. Yeah.
But so you're a marathoner,
Yes.
and I think that provides a really good example, Craig, of some of the dynamics that we're talking about. If if you're going to run a marathon for the first time,
Hmm.
never done it before, let's say.
Okay.
So, well, the first thing you start training, the first thing that happens is you get sore.
It's true.
There's discomfort.
Absolutely.
And that's the same thing that happens. And someone could say to themselves, oh man, I can't live this sore all the time. I can't train this sore all the time for months so that I can run 26.2 miles.
Mhm.
They don't understand that you get past the soreness
Mhm.
and that the soreness belongs in the process. It says you're strengthening, you're building your endurance and those kinds of things.
Yeah. Perfect example. And then that doesn't mean that you stop. That means that you're expanding. and you're growing. So what I'm hearing you say is that most people, when they begin to think and play bigger and they begin to experience some discomfort, they look at that as a sign to retreat as opposed to, oh, I'm on the right trajectory. Real quick, if you've been vibing with this conversation and you're committed to making this your season of transformation, grab my book, The Reinvention Formula. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and it reveals the exact strategies I used to go from stuck on Wall Street for 13 years misaligned to building a global movement, and how you can reinvent your identity, your business, and your life with intention. You can get it anywhere books are sold, Amazon included. And if you like to listen, Audible's got you covered. No hype, just real tools that actually work. Back to the episode.
Right. Yeah. Resistance. We all have to deal with resistance in life. You start some big new effort. You look at New Year's resolutions and how quickly they fizzle out for people. I think anytime we embark on some epic kind of goal, a quantum leap goal, we've got this voice in our head, or we have these experiences. We get sore, we make a mistake, we embarrass ourselves, we get scared, those kinds of things. And this villain voice in our head, if I guess we could call it that, says, what are you doing here? You could get hurt, and so on. And we, on the other hand, we got a hero voice in our head, and that's the cheerleader voice. That's the one that focuses on our strengths, our assets, our potential, and so forth. And we can listen to whichever voice we want to listen to. But there's a statistic that we've come up with years and years ago in working with companies on mergers and acquisitions. And in any big deal, I'm talking in kind of generalities, Craig, but let's say company A is going to acquire company B, but there's going to be a full-scale merger. It's not going to be a standalone acquisition. They're going to fold these companies. They're going to consolidate them pretty much into one big organization.
Yep.
Well, about 20% of the workforce will buy in. They'll get on board. They'll help drive the change. Maybe because they play to win, maybe because they think they're going to come out ahead, they're going to get a pay raise, who knows, bigger title. But about 20% of the people you can count on to really help you drive the change. About 50% of the workforce sits on the fence. It's like the jury is out. I don't know how I'm going to be affected here. I'm going to wait and see. I think and so you're paying them the same you were before, but they're not helping drive this effort, and you need more from them. But then there's a 30% cohort that resist. It is so predictable, and they'll resist in all kinds of ways. Okay, that's organizations, and that pattern repeats itself again and again and again. And I think I've watched this. See if you can relate to this.
Sure.
When an individual sets a really big goal for themselves, you got this stuff going off in your head. About 20% of it is your hero voice. It's your, I can do this. You still got a little bit of uncertainty. Maybe you're not totally all in, or somebody you're working with, you're watching this.
Yep.
Then there'll be about 30% of the self, if you will, that is holding back, or they get scared. They start kind of countering the effort. And people need to know that is predictable, and they need to know how to manage it. That's one of the things that I try to do, is tell people the journey, what the path looks like, because quantum leaps it's not just this linear path like this. It's kind of like, yes, and it can go along, like that, but then they can happen so suddenly, and the lead up to them can be so deceptively slow.
Yeah.
But what about that 20-50-30 thing? Have you seen stuff like that in people?
Yeah, so I love that you said this is predictable, right? So anytime you begin to think bigger or challenge your perceived limitation, 20% hero voice, we got this, we could do it. 30% a little analytical and logical, maybe, not so sure. So I wanted to, I'm so excited to ask you. So what is the other 50%?
Well, you've got 20% that have the buy-in and the push.
Hmm.
You got 30% that's down here, they're the drag. Okay. So that's 50% right there total. And then your 50% on the fence, that's where you want to try to recruit. You try to, I'm going to go back to organization scenario
Please.
now. So in an organization, we'll tell top management, look, here you are trying to turn around that bottom 30% of the critics. Forget the critics. Some of those people will go to their grave saying this is a bad deal, bad plan, poorly executed, whatever. Okay. Recruit from the 50%, the people that are on the fence, or as you just put it, that logical, practical, wait and see kind of part up here that's still the undecided,
Yeah.
more or less. Recruit from that. Come on over here. Get with me. Let's look at the lot. You want to talk logic? Okay, let's look at the logic. Let's look at the possibilities. There's 30% down here in my head. It just wants to talk about the problems, the problems, the problems. And we know that when change hits, whether it's a merger of two companies or whether we hit ourselves with this big, epic, five-star quantum leap goal, when change hits, the first scan is for danger. That is how we're wired as human beings. I mean, from birth, when change hits, the first scan is for danger, which is good. That instinct is there to protect you. It has your best interest at heart.
Mhm.
But people get stuck there because it has that voice or that instinct has one key purpose, and it is to say, be careful. Be careful here. Once it's done that, it becomes problematic. Hear the message and then start thinking possibilities, starts thinking potential, ways of working. Yeah, I get it. I get it. I could lose some money here, or I could get embarrassed here. I could fail, whatever. I know that. I know that. But look over here, because as the psychologist Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in economics for his research that was so fascinating, where he found that we weigh losses twice as heavy as we do gains, or potential losses versus potential gains. So when we're sizing up a big risk,
Yeah.
we give a lopsided assessment.
Oof.
And it is so human. And it happens in organizations and it happens with individuals that are trying to make that real breakthrough of one kind or another in their life.
This is so good. I love the way you articulated this. So, and I just want to run this back. 20% hero, 30% logical, practical, and then the 50% we want to recruit. And for those that are very logical, okay, let's get logical for a second, right?
Yeah.
And then we still recruit. And that just, it makes it, the way that you unpack that makes it very manageable for somebody that might be scared of even considering what's beyond the logic.
Yeah. The I, I I just hammer on execs all the time in a big merger situation because they'll be wanting to try to sweet talk the resistors, the critics of the deal. Um, they want to, they want to give attention to those people and see if they can't bring them around. Well, most of those people aren't going to come around, and you need to make alumni out of some of those people, probably, because that sends a message to the people on the fence, the 50%, Uh, yeah, I think it makes sense to get on board. There's some logic in getting on board here. But some of those people are never, never going to come around, but it's very seductive to try to listen to their noise, their griping, their complaining, the whining, the fretting, whatever, and try to bring them along. But it's kind of like, let's say that there's a company there in New York, some big corporation or whatever, and you got a small group of protesters that are protesting some aspect of this company's corporate behavior.
Mhm.
And so let's say you got 25, 50 protesters. They got signs, banners, bullhorns, whatever. What do they want more than anything? They want the media to come, capture them on video, and show it on the evening news.
Mhm.
They want attention. They want attention. Well, that same thing holds true when you're doing a merger. Those people that are the complainers, they, they love the attention, but you just don't get any payback there as an executive trying to recruit those people. It's tough. Some of those people, the only thing that'll bring a lot of those people on board and make them positive minded and really to help is once the deal is blatantly successful.
Yeah.
Well, same thing with your own inner critic, I think. Just keep pushing. Once you've heard the message, be careful. Yeah, I got it. You know, that basic instinct that we've all got when change hits. The first scan is for danger. Okay, you told me to be careful. I got it. Now, let's get on down the road and push for wins, push for early wins, push for progress.
That's genius. I love that. Okay, I got it. Now let's push down the road, the momentum. And when you start thinking about the wins, I feel like the momentum becomes inevitable. And this is amazing. And something else that you speak about a lot, and it kind of ties into this, and I see a lot of people fall into this, and it's the reasonable trap because their logical brains would say, whoa, let's be realistic. Let's be practical here.
Yeah.
What's up with that? And how can we, for someone that's been programmed for so long to be practical, to be logical, how do we bust past that reasonable trap?
I think I think if someone it maybe a lot of it, Craig, comes down to just desire.
Mm.
How much do you want that thing?
Oof. Yes.
Or how much fun would it be? How much fun is it to do that? I know you do this Venn diagrams thing
Mhm.
where you say, draw a circle, in that circle, list 5 things that you love doing.
Yep.
Draw another circle,
Mhm.
list 5 things that you're good at.
Yeah.
You got some skill here, some natural abilities.
That's right.
Then you look at where those 2 things overlap.
That's right.
Go there.
I love it.
Did I do you a fair job? Is that
You said it better than I do. So
yeah.
perfect.
But anyway, I think that is so true. Um, if we go to our sweet spot and let our signature strengths really try to exploit those, you can work really, really hard, but it's fun. And I talk about in the U Squared handbook and the Quantum Leap Strategy handbook about uh, try easier. Quantum leaps so often are easier
Hmm.
than more incremental goals,
Yeah.
the quantum leap goals. Astro Teller, who is the guy that heads up Google X, which is their moonshot part of the Google organization, Astro Teller, and yeah, I suspect you've heard this long ago, but he's got this line that I love, which is it's often easier to make something 10 times bigger than it is to make it 10% bigger. Um, when I went into merger work back at the end of the 70s, it's 1979,
Wow.
and I had about 5 key reasons for doing that. But the day I did that, I said, okay, team, today we double our fees like that. It gets back to this thing about choices and um, things that can come easier. Now, when I set that goal for my little company, it was absurd. We were a small little consulting practice in Dallas, Texas. Nobody had heard of us. Um, there were no such things as consulting practices, very focused, tight consulting practices in big consulting firms that focus specifically on the integration process.
Hmm.
They'd throw a team together ad hoc and they'd go, and some deals were successful, some were not. Um, but I think the desire is a big thing. Scott Adams, the guy that did the Dilbert cartoons,
Yep.
he has this interesting thing. He talks about how people talk about passion. That's very closely related to desire,
Yeah.
a passion for something. But he said, here's what I've found. It seems to me that passion often is very closely tied to just success. If you're really being successful, if you're blowing and going, you got some passion for it. That's fun.
Mm.
But if things start to go off the rails, if whatever you're trying to do heads south,
Mm.
watch the passion fade. I think and he says passion is very closely aligned with talent, which gets back to that Venn diagram thing. What am I good at?
Mm.
Those things. And if that's where we're deploying, that if that's where we're charting our path toward a quantum leap goal, um, I think that, so I think the desire is a huge thing. How much do you want it?
Yeah.
And can you have fun doing it?
So good. For me, spirituality is very important to me. Something that I really study is the wisdom of Kabbalah. It's not a religion, it's a technology. And one of the big concepts in it is desire. And basically, desire creates your vessel or your capacity to receive more. And as long as you're willing to awaken your desire, the amount, the direct proportion of what you could receive continues to expand. And so I love what you just described. I wanted to ask you, are there ways where somebody can awaken or increase their level of desire, or does that have to just come from within, do you think?
I think other people can inspire us. Other people can see potential that we don't see in ourselves. Um, I think hanging out with other super successful people is a facilitative force. Um, I think just picking a challenging goal and deciding, damn it, I'm going to chase it. We learn things about ourselves. Um, this whole thing, you know, the research on goal setting, the formal research kind of began back in 1968 with Edwin Locke, the psychologist back then. And he kept playing with this thing, just doing all these research projects around goal setting, everything. And then in the 90s, I guess it was, Gary Latham teamed up with him and they wrote a kind of a definitive definitive book that came out in 1990, I think it was, about goal setting theory. And they firmly established that big goals work better than small goals or intermediate goals.
Interesting.
Um, so it works to your advantage to pick a challenging goal, something that puts you beyond, in my opinion, go beyond the incremental steps and go kind of swing for the fences, you know, because the big goals, here's what they do. First of all, they're more exciting.
For
They're
sure.
more inspiring. Secondly, they're more, they, they create more energy. They bring forth more creativity and ingenuity. They rally more support from other people, which you will need. And they're self-reinforcing. Um, it's it's interesting though how some now I just a big believer in having objectives, clearly defined objectives, but and I believe in small goals and more intermediate goals. I think they serve you well as okay, small goals this week. This is what I will do in pursuit of that big overarching quantum leap goal. Okay, small goals, you know, weekly objectives, monthly objectives, whatever. And then I believe in the intermediate goals like milestones, key milestones that I need to hit to get to that quantum leap. Okay. And I think you can set deadlines on those first two, the small goals and the intermediate goals. Works pretty well to set deadlines on those because you need time constraints. Once again, that brings forth more creativity and more energizing. You just become more efficient. There are pros and cons. No, that's not the way to say it. There are times I think when we should set definite deadlines on that big epic goal, and sometimes not.
Okay.
Um, that's my experience. For example, let's say I want to write another book, and this time I'm going to write another hardback book.
Mhm.
Okay, which I favor the shorthand books, but anyway.
Those are amazing, by the way. I want to encourage everybody to go grab a couple of prices and one for a friend too.
Uh, but let's say I set a goal for myself, and I said, okay, here we are. It's middle October of 2025. 2 years from now, by October of 27, I am going to have a New York Times best-selling book. Okay, on the surface, that sounds pretty reasonable. Um, but there are too many things you don't control. You don't know what else is going to be hitting the market at the same time your book does.
Mhm.
You don't know what kind of world affairs are going to be coming down. There were people that had books scheduled to launch when COVID hit.
Yeah.
It blew up
Mm.
their chances. Um, there were people that were publishing books on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but a new administration comes in and that market just began to crater. So there are so many unpredictables out there for some goals. Uh, for you to set a hard deadline and then end up being a failure because you didn't do it. You didn't pull it off. You wrote the book, you even got it published, but it was unfortunate timing. Um, so I tell people to be pretty judicious in setting deadlines for yourself sometimes. I did not set a deadline for myself when I said in 1979, we will become number one in the United States in merger integration strategy. That that particular slice of the whole merger and acquisition process, the integration process, we're going to become number one there. It was outrageous. It was a ridiculous goal.
Unreasonable.
Unreasonable, yes. But I didn't put a deadline on it. And the other thing that made it work is that going for it was fun. The whole process was fun. I did so many things wrong
Mm.
in the process, but that's that's the way the machine works, you know. You're talking about this vessel
Yeah.
and opening yourself up. Talk about that a little bit more. That I want to hear you expound on that a little bit
Yeah.
more.
This is amazing, by the way. I can't stress enough for everyone listening. If you were not already familiar with how the prices work, start with U squared, grab the quantum leap theory, work your way up. They're amazing. And he does such a great job of making this so accessible. Just want to say that again. We'll put all that in the show notes. So this idea of the vessel, basically, in the wisdom of Kabbalah, our desire is our vessel. And to the extent at which we have a big desire, we have a big capacity to fulfill that desire. So if you have a small desire, you're limited on what you can actually accomplish or a quantum leap that you could bring into fruition. So the more that you're willing to expand your desire, at the same time you expand your vessel and you have the ability to receive what we believe is already here. Because it's not a chasing game, it's more of a receiving game. It's more of allowing, right? Because all the abundance really is here. It's about being available for it. And just to make a connection to your brilliant work, I think most people don't even consider swinging for the fences or these unreasonable goals. So by even just listening to Dr. Price and considering what would be such a crazy idea right now that it would be so unreasonable that it would be for the fences, even that thought expands your vessel from what you can now receive. So I hope I articulated that well, but that's kind of what
Yeah.
I mean.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And it's kind of you're kind of taking us into this zone that I talk about the power of the unseen forces
Yes.
when you're going for a quantum leap. Um, a big mistake that people make and that keeps them from ever really pulling the trigger on a quantum leap is they think, well, I don't have all the resources. Number two, well, I don't know how to get there.
Mhm.
Uh, sometimes a quantum leap goal, you can figure it's pretty straightforward how you would get there. But a lot of times it's not. And it's a learning process, it's a discovery process. And they're afraid to start before they got a kind of a fully hammered out 2-year plan because you don't know enough to plan if it's a really big, challenging goal. It's something that you haven't done before. And you've got these legacy behaviors. That's your status quo. That's the way you've been running. Okay. And it's brought you a certain level of success. Those behaviors were effective at bringing you to this level you're at. But those are not, in all likelihood, those are not the behaviors that are going to take you to an altogether different arc of achievement. And you're going to have to try differently. And that means you're going to get uncomfortable. That means you're going to have this psychological soreness, this resistance, and all of these things. Um, you you have to wander into the unknown. You have to be in that playing to win spirit. And that gets to the mindset part. And I know you in your book, The Reinvention Formula, you talk about this thing, about the mind, the power of the mind.
Mhm.
So, in terms of importance, in the scheme of things, of going for a really big goal, Craig, if you said 3 or 4 most critical things, where would you put this whole thing about mindset or attitude or your thinking, whatever?
I think that's primary. I think of the word consciousness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I am so in line with you.
Yeah.
That's the thing that will make you or break you in the quantum leap
Yeah.
because your thinking designs your doing.
Mm.
Um, performance begins inside the brain, always has, always will. And so, how would you coach people to have that optimistic mindset, that possibility thinking, to bring that into their thinking processes more fully?
I love this conversation so much, in case you didn't hear me say that enough. I think that when you're going, first of all, you have to commit to thinking bigger, right? Because it's unnatural. So you have to take some time to think what would be so out of the park in this particular lane. And then, like you said, right away, psychological soreness. That was amazing. You reminded me of when you asked me about the marathon. let's say you never ran one and you're trained to get to 26.2, you start feeling sore, but that's not a bad thing. That means you're on the right trajectory, right? And so when you start thinking bigger, and then the logical mind or the limiting beliefs come in, you have that psychological soreness, that is feedback that you're beginning to expand what you even believed was possible. And I think that tells us that we're on the right trajectory.
Yeah. Uh, we did this study not too long ago, um, called it the Deep Strengths Project. What we did, Craig, is we surveyed over 300 CEOs across corporate America. We got great participation from these people. We looked at for-profit organizations, not-for-profit organizations. And it cut across all these different industry sectors. And we listed 10 deep strengths that here was the premise that I started with. I posed the question, what makes an organization strong? And again, I want you to, as I go through this and talking about it from an organization, a corporate standpoint, just take that over here to a personal, to an individual standpoint, because this stuff travels to
Sure.
the individual world just very, very handily. I said, what makes an organization strong? And what the conventional practice is to, okay, you go look at what kind of revenues do they have? What kind of profit do they have? What's their stock price? What's their PE ratio? You know, um, what's customer retention like? All of these kinds of things. Well, those are not what make an organization strong. Well, they help after they're there, but they're not what those are results. What were the causes? And my premise was that we have to go back further and to get to what was there originally that brought those back. And I'm thinking, and I'm saying the things that produce results, the causes, are things like can-do ability, resilience, staying power, energy level. There are things like this, that if and nobody measures those dimensions in corporations. It's astonishing. Nobody's measuring these things. And they talk about, okay, this is a world of high velocity change. We've got to get better at it, we got to become more change adaptable. I'm saying, bull, let's get ahead of change. Let's already be there when change hits so that we're anti-fragile. We profit from change. We benefit from change
Mm.
to such an extent that we cause change ourselves. We're preemptive. Um, and I talk about the 4 levels of change in one of my handbooks, where we're causing change. We're creating change because it's beneficial. And that's what we're doing when we're making a quantum leap. But anyway, back to the deep strength survey.
Yeah.
We looked at all these 10 things that I defined as deep strengths. And I asked the CEOs, what are the most important 3? Well, I asked them to rank order all 10. Most important to least important for driving operating results. Not would it be a feel-good factor, not would it be a nice to have, but to what extent do these impact operating effectiveness, hardcore results, which that's the CEO's main duty. You got to deliver the goods. Okay, out of all of these 10 deep strengths, here's what came out on top. The top 3: can do ability, resilience, and creativity and innovation. Okay, and it was the same top 3 for both for-profit organizations, not-for-profit organizations. Both groups of CEOs ranked them in the top 3. There was one flip with not-for-profits. They put I think they flipped the resilience and the creativity and innovation were both in top three. Okay. Can-do ability, resilience, and creativity and innovation. Optimism drives all three of these. In fact, it drives all 10 of the deep strengths that we were studying. And it just drives home the importance of how we manage our thinking processes.
Ooh.
And you know, I never had a course in how to think optimistically or the benefits of thinking optimistic. I got a bachelor's degree, I got a master's degree, I got a PhD. Not one time. Even though my last two degrees had, heavy on psychology. I never had a course on that. You know where I got that kind of message? It was from people like Napoleon Hill and psycho-cybernetics and some of those lay psychologist authors back, decades ago.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there's some really good psychology books written by credentialed psychologists that really get into modern day science and how important the thinking is. But if we could just learn to really manage how we think, and you've probably heard of this study that just blew my mind away. Was this study that they found, and I'll ask when I'm doing a keynote, I'll ask the audience, which do you think is more important, thinking positive or not thinking negative? And they're all kind of like, was this a trick question? And I say, no, it's not a trick question. We tend to think of growing up, I think most of us, at least, certainly me, had the idea that this is a one-dimensional attitude scale. And you've got, let's say at the low end, because it's supposed to be bad, negative thinking, positive thinking, optimism is supposed to be the good stuff, and it's on the other end of the scale. But the research shows that they're two different scales. And you get a lot more mileage out of diminishing your negative thinking than you will get out of increasing positive thinking.
And you mentioned earlier in the conversation so beautifully that I forgot how you articulated, but basically that it's double powerful to think negative than to think positive.
Yeah,
So people,
the Daniel Kahneman thing that
yeah,
we weigh negative events, losses, or the threat of losses twice as heavily. It's twice the psychological hit.
yeah,
And I guess if you just wanted to kind of monetize it, let's say you lose $100, it hurts a heck of a lot more than if you found $100 bill.
so true. It's incredible. By the way, I believe, first of all, I know your reputation, your credibility is off the charts, but I get a feeling you will be looked at 100 years from now, just like the legend that you just mentioned. I think your work is so brilliant and it's amazing. And I think it's gonna create such a ripple effect long after this generation. I just wanted to share that. As we get near the end today, I wanted to ask you before we wrapped up, how much do we need friction and discomfort to become who we were meant to be?
What a beautiful question. Well, that is so perfect. It's like a setup question. I would have asked you to ask. I didn't even think about this whole thing of friction. That is, um, we need friction in our lives. One of the most dangerous things that can happen is overstabilization. We need equilibrium. We need a little bit of struggle. Uh, Give you a case in point, because that's what triggers the growth. It triggers the growth hormones in us, and it triggers just expansion and increase. For example, and here's the example I always use. I don't go down the street to LA Fitness. I don't go there to take a nap. I don't go to the gym to watch TV. I go to the gym to work out my body. So what do I do there? I stress my muscles. I stress my heart. I stress my lungs. I stress, tendons, whatever. Why? Because that is essential to growth. We talked about, yeah, you make yourself uncomfortable. You don't go there to get comfortable. You go there to grow. Um, One of my favorite writers these days is this guy, Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He's this distinguished professor of risk, I believe it is, like New York University, somewhere there in your territory. He's the guy that wrote The Black Swan, Fooled
Okay.
by Randomness, and a bunch of this
Yep.
stuff. This guy, he's first of all, he's funny, and secondly, he is so smart and kind of iconoclastic. But anyway, he wrote this book called Anti-Fragile, and I used that word a while ago. Um, if we get if we're not trying, stretching ourselves, putting ourselves to test, if you will, it's not good for the body. It's not good for the brain. It's certainly not good for achievement. But he wrote this book called Anti-Fragile, and in it he talks about anti-fragile is something or someone that benefits from friction, from instability, from stress. And we think of there's good stress and there's bad stress, but anyway, so this guy, he writes in this book about, to make his point, he says, okay, let's say that you've got this box, this carton of really fine super crystal champagne glasses, and you're going to send them, let's say, from New York to Phoenix, Arizona. Okay. So you pack them very carefully. You put styrofoam bubbles around, you do all this stuff, and you stamp on the outside fragile, handle with care, glass inside, so on and so forth. Okay. Let's say that, though, that the next thing you're going to ship to Phoenix is a basketball. Okay. Well, a basketball is resilient. Okay.
Mhm.
And so you just throw it in there. You might put a little bit of paper around it, but basically you package it up, tape it up, and you ship it. And if it gets bounced around, the box gets bent in somewhat, the ball is resilient and it comes back the same. It comes back the way it was. But then let's say there's a third item, whatever it might be, and it's anti-fragile
Mhm.
and it benefits from stress. It needs stress. It gets better if it gets bounced around, stressed, friction, dealing with friction and so forth. So you package it up. You don't put any wrapping whatsoever around that. And on the outside, you put, give it hell, toss it around. Be careless with this box. Um, and I think we need to be a little bit more careless with ourselves.
Wow.
Uh, we're too careful. Alfred
Ooh.
Adler, one of the great psychologists, contemporary of Sigmund Freud's, he said, one of the chief dangers in life is that you will take too many precautions. And I think that's so true. You know, um, there is such value in putting ourselves out there. And again, boy, the research, Craig, we could just go on and on about the research that supports this and would say, and the gratification that comes on the backside of it. You know that when you finish a marathon, man,
Priceless.
there's I know we're running out of time here.
I'm good if you're good. Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay.
There's this, we're talking marathons that kind of come up 2 or 3 times. And I never ran one. I used to run 10Ks. Okay.
It's a good
And I
distance.
ran them to have done it, to feel good about it. I never was competitive or anything like that. I did sign up for um, half a marathon one time,
Mhm.
but then my wife had to have some minor surgery done or something. And she said, no way, you're going to go run it because you've got to be functional this next week. And if you run a half marathon, you're probably going to be laid up in bed or something. But anyway, there is this marathon guy. He used to be here in Dallas, who is a trainer of marathon people who want to run a marathon. And every January, he'd start up a new class and train people through the year to be ready to participate. Particularly, kind of the target was the Dallas White Rock Marathon. That's what they called it then. It's been renamed and it takes a different route now and so forth. But anyway, this guy is really fascinating because the first class would come together.
Mhm.
And he'd stand there in January, and he'd look out across the room, and it would just be the most random mixture of people you've ever seen. You'd have young people and some old people. You'd have men, women, some that looked like they're in great shape, and some looked like they're terrible shape. So he'd stare at this crowd for a few minutes, and he'd say, "Let's get one thing clear: nobody in this room is going to win the White Rock Marathon." He said, "But that's not your goal. Your goal is to finish and get the best time you can."
Best time you can.
And he said, "Let me tell you the secret to running a marathon." Of course, everybody's on the edge of their chair.
Yeah.
And
So
he'd say,
why?
"The secret to running a marathon is 8 inches." Everybody's thinking, what the heck? It's
This,
not your stride, but he'd say it's the 8 inches between your ears.
yeah.
And I think that's a story he got from Sebastian Coe.
Mhm.
Uh, but anyway, it's a killer story. And the secret, that same secret holds true if you want to make quantum leap. The secret is the 8 inches between your ears. And if we could just learn to reduce that negativity, that negative thinking, sure, increase the positive thinking, but man, don't, you know, don't let the negativity, that pessimism take up mind space and crowd out the things that are going to enable you to get to the finish line.
What an awesome story, too. So relevant to everything we're talking about. The 8 inches. Not enough to just think positive, but to eliminate to the best of your ability the negativity. Yeah,
Yeah.
so good. I want to ask you as we get ready to land the plane, with all the unbelievable things that you have going on, what are you personally most excited about right now?
Well, when you get to this point in life, you look at your runway, you know, and that's always a reality. Um, I'm a big believer in fitness. I think weightlifting, aerobics, that's the fountain of youth. It's about as good a mood stabilizer as any drug you're going to find. It's a confidence builder.
Heck
It's
yeah.
a respect gatherer from other people.
Ooh,
Uh, it builds self-discipline beyond the fitness itself. It
totally.
it permeates the rest of your life. I want to stay fit, healthy. Um, I love writing, um, and thinking, sharing ideas with really similar minds like yours, Craig. It just it's such a kick, you know. Um, we've got this U squared accelerator that we're launching, and it's a very tight program, very compact. Um, it's got real constraints that we impose on it because we believe in constraints, time limits, things like that. Um, Martin Luther, the great theologian, said, "The fewer the words, the better the prayer." And that's that's kind of my philosophy, I think. When I wrote my handbooks, um, it's very, very deliberate. Um, it's kind of my natural writing style anyway, but I know that I like writing, whether it's my blog that you can buy. By the way, if people want the blog, it's on pritchettu2.com.
Mhm.
Okay. pritchettu2.com. And you'll see my thinking there on other things like my blogs and so forth. But writing, if you compress the writing, I think it becomes more powerful. It's kind of like a magnifying glass. You focus the light and you can start a fire.
Oof.
Um, so I want to keep on writing. I enjoy the thinking process. I work with some clients, pretty selective. Um, I I've been so fortunate in life. Um, I've had amazing luckiness, which that's my last handbook. Have you seen that? Lucky You?
Not yet.
I'm going to send it to you today.
Please.
And I wrote this last handbook, Lucky You, a year or so ago. And I wrote it because more and more I began to understand how big a role luck plays in our lives. But I don't mean just random luck. I'm talking about the luck that one can engineer into their life.
Oof.
And we can. And it is so heavy in its influence in reaching our big goals. Um, so many of the principles in people's success books and achievement books and so forth, um, they advocate doing the same things that I advocate in Lucky You. Well, what the success books I don't think really grasp is the fact that if you do those things, you're inviting luck into your life. And
Engineering it.
if you don't do those things, boy, you're missing out so much. And so and it's a very again, the handbook, Lucky You, it's based on scientific research too.
Mhm.
It's not just this is what I think.
Yeah.
Um, I was amazed when I started writing the book. Well, first of all, I sketched out the table of contents, and then I wrote the book pretty much first draft before I really went out there and started reading about luck. I just thought, okay, as a psychologist, look at my experience, the good fortune I've had in life.
Mhm.
Um, what do I think about luck? What do I really believe about this thing called luck? And then I started reading these other books, and there are very few books on luck.
Interesting.
I think couple of years ago or so, Amazon listed something like 57,000 books on that had leadership somewhere in the title.
Yep.
When I started looking for books on luck, I found about a dozen, Craig, that I thought were really worth reading or they were germane to what I was trying to get at. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to get that in the mail to you today.
Please. I will scarf it down and be very grateful. And I just wanted to ask you, so I'm curious, is spirituality something that's important to you? And when you talk about the science behind luck, is that similar to when you're really connected and you have faith and you receive some surprise support or divine blessings?
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Understood.
Luck is one of the unseen forces that
Understood.
I talk about the unseen forces.
Mhm.
And I think I think there are divine forces in the world. And I think that there are things as human beings, we are so ignorant overall, and so much we don't know. But the in the quantum leap strategy, I talk about the quantum leap ritual. And I think that things like that, the meditative things, and lucky you, I talk about giving yourself time for reverie and why that's important because and it's not that difficult to process, although it takes some practice and some dedicated time to go into this state of reverie where our brain functions change and the prefrontal cortex goes offline and the alpha and theta waves start kicking into gear. And that's where we start getting the intuition, the creative ideas, the aha moments, and so forth. And it's it feels kind of supernatural if you really get to it.
My cup of tea. I love
Yeah,
that stuff. I believe in it
yeah,
wholeheartedly. I love that you said that. For anyone that's like, maybe this is a little woo-woo for them, or what you're saying is this is something that you can engineer.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was absolutely incredible. This was a masterpiece. It was a master class. We're going to put all the stuff in the show notes, all the stuff that you have going on, and just absolutely incredible. And before we wrapped up, I wanted to maybe ask you two, three questions, rapid fire, very quick answers.
Sure.
You ready for me?
Okay.
Let's do it. Your
Vape up.
favorite movie?
I'm sorry.
Your favorite movie, Price?
Oh, my favorite movie. Oh gosh, I don't know. Uh, rapid fire. See, I think too much. I don't come back with just something, oh, whatever. I loved Tombstone. I love Top Gun. I loved
Classics.
uh, this crazy little movie that's got Paul Newman in it called Nobody's Fool. Nobody even knows about that movie, but it's a great these character studies.
Yeah.
Um, it's a simple movie, but it's good. Um, uh, I don't know. What's your favorite movie?
Good question. I like some of the classics like Gladiator. I like movies that inspire me, like Soul Surfer, and I like the Batman movies. There's some inspiration in those, believe it or not. I do like Top Gun. I like the second one too. Um, yeah, I like the ones that make me feel elevated. I like
Yeah.
inspiration.
Rocky was a good one like that.
One of my favorite franchises ever.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Okay, two more.
Okay.
Your favorite workout?
My favorite workout. I like working out with free weights, some machines.
Mhm.
I like lifting. I like push-ups. Um, I will sometimes go to the gym and say, just go to the gym. I
Yeah.
don't feel like it today. Just grab the bag, go to the gym. You don't have to do anything. Just go to the gym. When I get there, and I'll say, okay, okay, I'm here. What the heck? And so, you suit up, whatever. And I'll say, okay, this got to do 10 push-ups, just 10. You can stop. Well, if I can do 10, I keep going, I keep going, I keep going. Then I'll do a second set and I may do a third set. But I think that the idea of just starting,
Hmm.
you know, I've got in one of the handbooks I wrote, it talked about 60 seconds of self-discipline. That's all you got to do. Can you discipline yourself for 60 seconds? That just start because then you got momentum. You're moving and things just begin to
Unfold. Yeah. From that, momentum becomes inevitable if you're willing to do 60 seconds of discipline. I love it. Final one. Your favorite morning ritual essential.
brushing my teeth. I
Great one.
I get my room straight, get the bedroom straight.
Yeah,
I I really don't like messes.
same.
The messier my world is around me, I'm talking about just clutter, the
Yeah.
messier my head is. Um, um, I put myself together though. I I make, I don't slop around. I get up consistently at the same time because I'll wake up, and there's not going to be any more really super good rest in bed or anything. And I just feel better about myself if I get up and get going. And so I go
Same.
through the morning routine and package myself up, and then I head to the office. I don't, usually I will go over my goals and any kind of contemplative meditation period, quantum leap ritual kind of thing, I tend to do that early evening. And I think which kind of gets to what's the best time to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that there are times, we're talking about this optimism, pessimism thing. We know that there are certain times of the day when positive mindedness is probably going to peak. And that's from about this podcast was perfect because it landed at 10 o'clock my time. Okay. And late morning is one of the peak times. If I'm going to do a keynote, give me 10 o'clock in the morning for a client, don't give me 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2:30. Oh my goodness. So I'll stick with the optimism for a minute. Late morning and early evening are usually the times when optimism peaks. And the lower zone or darker thinking would tend to come first half of the afternoon, kind of, and the wee early morning hours, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. If you're really in a depressed state or really a state of worry, it looks the bleakest usually in that 3 o'clock to 5, 6 o'clock in the morning period.
Interesting. Noted. Good to know. Well, this was incredible. Before we wrap up, anything that you want to share? Feel good about the conversation.
I just think I love to see people like you, young guys that are so full of, you got a high energy level, which that is a huge career asset. And you're focused. I love sharing ideas. I want to stay close,
Definitely.
because there's just huge value in idea sharing, kicking things around.
Yeah.
So forth. Hey, did you hear about this? Hey, did you see this book? Whatever.
Definitely. Price, thank you so much for stopping by today and dropping these priceless, juicy nuggets.
Thank you.
If you're successful but feel called to something bigger, if there's a message you're meant to share, I created the Rise Reinvention formula for you. This is the same system that's helped high achievers get crystal clear on their vision, build unshakable conviction, and create seven-figure businesses around what actually lights them up. Go to risewithcraig.com for a free training and to book a clarity call so we can discover what you truly desire and build a roadmap to get there. Playing small isn't just canceled, it's spiritually irresponsible. Go to risewithcraig.com now. Let's go.